Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cash Up, a weekly show where we'll converse with amazing folks in DFIR. And today I'm so excited to be joined by Phill Moore. Phill is a leading forensicator, blogger, and instructor in digital forensics. Phil's been conducting digital forensics exams for well over a decade, and he may be best known as the originator of This Week in Forensics. Currently, Phill is the lead investigator, technical lead, at CyberCX, formerly Klein & Co., where he performs incident response and digital forensics examinations from employee investigations to insider threat to breach and incident response and more for a variety of clients. He's also a SANS instructor where he teaches 4500, Windows Forensic Analysis, and is a course co-author for 4308, Digital Forensics Essentials. Prior to his current roles, he worked as a senior digital forensic analyst for the New South Wales Police Force State Electronic Evidence Branch, analyzing evidence from serious major crimes across New South Wales. Phill started his career in digital support for Thomson Reuters. Phill has earned a master's degree in cybersecurity with a concentration in digital forensics from the University of New South Wales in Australia, a graduate certificate in forensic computing computer forensics from University of South Australia, and his Bachelor of Science in Business Information Systems from the University of New South Wales, and took an opportunity to study abroad at the University of Texas at Austin. Phill holds multiple certifications, including the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists, IASIS, Certified Forensic Computer Examiner, the CFCE, the GIAC Battlefield Forensic Acquisition Certification, GBFA, the GIAC Certified Forensic Analyst, GCFA, the Magnet Certified Forensics Examiner, MCFE, and the GIAC Certified Forensics Examiner, GCFE. Phill shares his research with the community via his blog, Think DFIR, as well as sharing a weekly roundup of all the digital forensics work from the community on This Week in Forensics. This should be required reading for everyone in this field to know what's happening and being shared in our industry. He even has a monthly podcast, This Month in Forensics, where he shares his thoughts on the top articles he shared on This Week in Forensics. In addition to his blogs and podcasts, Phill shares his scripts on his GitHub and has presented on his findings on everything from Google URL parsing to Google Home Forensics at conferences around the world, including the SANS DFIR Summit, Infuse, and multiple SANS at-night talks and webinars. Phil's contributions to the community have been recognized with multiple Forensic Forecast nominations, including Digital Forensics Blog of the Year 2017 and 2018, DFIR Show of the Year 2019 and 2020, Social Media Contributor of the Year 2019, DFIR Resource of the Year 2020, and the winner of the DFIR Resource of the Year 2019. Phill also finds other ways to give back to the community, such as being on the organizing committee for the DFRWS APAC conference, which was last week. I'm fortunate enough to have gotten to meet Phill years ago at a DFIR summit, and after only knowing him virtually before, many years later, I feel so fortunate to not only admire the work that Phill does and shares with the community, but to call him one of my dearest friends. He's a really amazing person, and he gives great tea recommendations. And with that, Phill Moore. Hi, Phill.
Hi.
Thank you so much for getting up at 2:30 in the morning to join us.
Happy to be here.
James is saying that he always loves reading your blog, that it's such a fantastic resource for the entire DFIR community, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it serves its purpose. It does what I need it to do, which is good.
So all of the things you've done, transitioning from studying digital forensics to working with law enforcement cases to now working in corporate and IR and teaching, what is your path? How did you get here?
I'd like to say it was this really, really complicated and difficult story, but it was pretty boring. I went to university, as you mentioned, at the University of New South Wales, and I went through a scholarship program, which was fantastic, got me to go to work at a variety of different companies as a student, and I realized I didn't want to do the thing that I'd spent my entire degree learning, which was good. It was good being able to do that.
So what was that you were studying?
So I was studying business information systems, and so the course as an overall kind of thing was about sitting in the middle of a business person and a technologist. So we did subjects in both the commerce and the business departments, as well as the computer science and engineering departments. And the idea was that you would be that translation layer, which was quite helpful.
The Phill translation layer, the PTL.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up going through the degree, and as you mentioned, going to the University of Texas to study. I did my degree, but it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it, the whole experience. But because of that, I ended up pushing my degree back. I finished 6 months later, and all of my friends finished a bit earlier. But because I did this study abroad, I ended up with 3 extra subjects I needed to complete to finish my degree. And that's when they actually started the digital forensics subject, which they ran twice. They literally ran it the time I was in it and the time after I was in it, and the guy that ran it left, and that's kind of the end of it. But it was one of my favorite. It was what was my favorite subject. It was the subject I scored the best in. So I thought, this is pretty cool. I should give that a go. And we did a site visit at the State Electronic Evidence Branch, and it's no longer called that, but at the time that's what it was called. And they said, we're hiring, and we hire people straight out of uni, no problems. We don't expect knowledge, we expect interest, aptitude, intelligence. We will teach you them, which is great for someone coming out of university. So I had a chat with Mike, who was in charge, and I said, what do I do? And he gave me some ideas, and I applied. That application process took a year because there was hiring freeze and all these things. And so I worked a bunch of temp jobs, and that's where it gets not super interesting. But yeah, in the beginning of 2011, I started at the New South Wales Police Force, and I worked there for about 8 years. And then that's kind of how I got into forensics. It's not the I started coding on my Commodore 64 when I was 4 years old. I had a strong interest in computers, for a long time. And then
I'm glad you remember my bio, Phill.
I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it. And when I was working at a variety of other places, you learn a lot of things. You get to see what people are doing, and it was something I thought, that sounds cool. I should go into that.
I think that's really neat because your first exposure was academic, and it's kind of sad that it was a short-played program in your school, but it really goes to show that exposure to digital forensics can make people realize it's a good fit. And I think it's a good argument for more exposure in academic settings for people to digital forensics. And I don't know that exists in enough of a robust area for as much as we need people in the field. That's kind of neat.
Well, I mean, like I'm very insular. I didn't really even know it existed. And like you hear about it and you're like, oh yeah, that does make sense. Someone should definitely be doing that. If it didn't exist, it really should. And I guess, yeah, so that just sounded interesting. And I thought, I could look at computers and figure out what people did on them. And lo and behold, that's not as easy as it kind of sounds like it is in a bio of a course outline, but it was,
says the man who wrote a digital fundamentals course for SANS, right? Like you literally wrote that course.
Yeah, and it was something that appealed to me to come into, and it still does, like, which is great because you pick a career and it's good for it to continue to appeal to you. But just being able to see how things work and figure out what someone was doing, whether they're telling you the truth, whether they're lying to you, which is amazing. And happens. It doesn't matter if they are your client or on the other side. People don't always tell the truth, but there are times where the data is just, it's there and you can't get around it. I'm sorry, that's just what
The
it
data
is.
is the data. I love it. I love it. It's so true. You know what else I love? I love the fact that the police department in New South Wales, in their electronic evidence branch, they were willing to have this program where they let students come through and meet them. And they said, hey, we actually don't care if you have experience. We want to know that you have aptitude and passion, and we can teach you the rest as long as you have that aptitude and that wherewithal. And so I really admire that. I think that that is also something that more organizations could adopt and increase their success.
Yeah, it's they're a bit of an interesting one, and I think the other law enforcement agencies in Australia are quite similar because I mean the only difference with Steve and the rest is that we had law enforcement officers working with civilian staff in the same capacity, slightly different, but the cops that came off, let's call it the street, but from a variety of places within the organisation, they came with an aptitude as well. There was no expectation from anyone that came in at an introductory level to know everything and be able to do everything. And so they were teaching people from the beginning anyway. So it didn't matter if you were brand new at a university or had a similar degree or experience or a law enforcement background, because they were going to teach us how to do everything anyway. And to their credit, they when we walked in the door, we went through a 6-week training class that my old boss put together, and he did a great job at making sure that you understood things about binary, things about acquisitions, things about analysis, presentation of forensic artifacts. And it's a really interesting thing because not everyone has that opportunity, and then they have to spend a lot of money on training. We didn't, because we had someone that put it all together for us, which was it was great. And it's a lot of effort to have someone
Yep.
compile and maintain a professional looking class. As someone that compiles and maintains a professional looking class, it's a lot of work.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that class you've been developing and maintaining. So you're one of
Sure.
the co-authors of 4308. We were fortunate enough to also have Catherine Headley on our previous episode, who's one of your course co-authors. Can you talk a little bit about what 4308 is like and what it was like writing that?
Yeah. So a few years ago, I was at the SANS Summit, and I was chatting with Rob Lee, and he said, would you be interested in getting involved in this? And I thought, yeah, sure, why not? That is definitely not the level of complacency that you should show when getting involved in a major project, but that's me, I guess. And I thought, that sounds fun. It's an interesting process. Signing up to a lot of work shouldn't be considered fun, but there was a lot of kind of, I get to hang out with Kat and Jason on an almost weekly basis, and we always have a few good laughs while we're working things out. And we put together this class. It was originally, they asked us to put together a 2-day class. They said, be easy, 2 days, teach people the fundamentals of digital forensics. And we thought, yeah, sure, we'll give that a run. And we wrote the outline, and we're looking at the outline, and we're like, I don't know if that's going to fly. And as we started writing the material, it just became increasingly apparent that it's really difficult to get across all of the things that we wanted to introduce people to, and some things that you just absolutely need to introduce people to in 2 days, especially if you want to have practicals and discussions and things about relaying your experience in a way that allows the students to appreciate what you're teaching them, because obviously some things don't really click until you give them that story
Absolutely.
as to why this thing is important. And so we spent pretty much all of last year, a bit of the year before, writing the material for this class, which was an experience. I'm not going to lie. Writing a 6-day class during COVID lockdown, because we believe it or not, Sydney did kind of lock down for a little bit at the beginning. And also, my wife being pregnant, my young daughter, well, my first daughter being, a 1-year-old at the time was a hectic experience, and I got to learn how to acknowledge having Baby Shark and the Wiggles on one screen while I was writing on the other. You just tune it out, or it just becomes you. It's one of those things where it is funny when you're walking down the street singing all these songs, and your wife's like, "Your daughter's not even here." And I'm like, "I know. It's just I have to do it."
It's Waffle Wednesday. It is. It's just a thing.
Yeah. So that was hard. I'm not gonna lie, but people have it much harder than having to work during a brief lockdown. So I can't say it was the most difficult thing people have to get through. But that was really it. We spent the first kind of half the year polishing it up, and then going through the first beta, realizing it wasn't polished as much as we wanted it to be, and fixing it and fixing it and fixing it. And now it's kind of at a stage where we're happy with the way that it's flowing, it's being presented, it's running around the world, which is great. And
That's
we're
awesome.
already making updates because things that were said, yeah. Oh no, I don't envy you. I'm not silly enough for a mobile class.
I joke with you, but like I updated my lecture on Sunday for last night, and then I had to do more updates yesterday because it's always changing. Like the active lecture, I'm always adding content.
We just wrote it in a way that's like some things. There's a lot of stuff that we won't have to change, and we'll change the examples, but when it comes down to it, there are a lot of fundamental things, which is great. Fundamental things in digital forensics that you just need to know, and maybe the examples and the cases and stuff will fix, but binary is binary, and you should be able.
1111 equals F is not going to change, and if it does, we're all screwed.
Exactly, right. And so the cool thing is that we have some latitude to work around the topics that we want to talk about, but there are some just like basic things that are just gonna be the same, and we're gonna get to be able to spend the time that we have with the students really refining that approach so that we can try and produce it's an expensive class, and we want to make sure we give people the best experience for that 6 days that they're in the class. And we've had a variety of different people come through, from managers and law enforcement, people that are interested to get into the field. And so you've kind of got to articulate, you've got to get through all those points. You've got to make sure that the person that is coming in that has to supervise the digital forensics person gets the same out of the class as the person who is like, I'm going to get started, I'm moving into this field, what do I need to know?
Right. There's a big difference between trying to understand what your team does so that you can better manage and prepping yourself to take 400 or 500. Like those are two very different goals in taking a class, and being able to meet those different needs while still providing that exceptional value is a difficult challenge.
Yeah, and it's we've got great feedback so far. So
excellent.
It's good. We're happy with the way things go, and we think our students have been happy with it, which is always what you want when you've put a lot of work into something. So yeah, and we're already looking at doing the updates. So it's never changing, never ending. We're just going to keep trying to make it better.
Love it. So I obviously follow your blogs and think DFIR. You usually post at least one researchy thing a month. I'm sure that that's your goal, because I noticed that that you make sure that for years there's something once a month. So I'm projecting there. But the last couple of weeks, you've been putting out about your participation in the Metaspike email CTF and documenting what you're doing. I am a CTF lover, as you know. You and I have competed in CTFs where we're watching each other. You beat me.
You hamstring yourself. Unfortunately, for those that don't, Jess is like, I need to use this as a way of testing Axiom, which is great. I mean, that is your job, so that's fair. But I'm sitting there going, well, I could just use this tool and I'll get the answer in 5 seconds. And Jess goes, Axiom doesn't do this. So I'm going to read the raw hex and I'm going to say this means this and this means that. And it's like,
and write
cool.
a ticket. Write the ticket up at the same
and
time.
write the ticket. and come literally a position behind me, I think, in both of the CTFs.
I did. Yeah, one behind you in both of them.
And make me feel wholly inadequate that I can't multitask like that.
No, but you still beat me. You still came in second, and I came in third. But I I helped make our tool better, so it made me happy.
Exactly.
But
I just want to.
and I will note that one time you were like, "Holy crap, Jessica got that answer really quick. She must have done it in Axiom. I'm gonna open Axiom and look at that. You told me that." I was like, he's like, "Oh, I saw you solve that one really quick, so I knew it could be done quickly in Axiom," which was kind of funny. It helps. You were OSINTing the CTF a little bit, but we both love CTFs. I love write-ups from CTFs. I like building CTFs, and you've been participating in the Metaspike CTF, which I haven't been able to participate in at the time right now, but I have been reading all your write-ups, and I've really been enjoying that. What's kind of your thoughts on email investigations now after doing this CTF?
Yeah, Armin's really smart. So let's get that part out of the way right up front.
He did a workshop at DFRWS APAC last week, which both you and I went to. And I remember I was just messaging you during it. I'm like, damn, this dude's smart.
It's so, I mean, CTFs are great. I don't generally have a lot of time and don't afford a lot of time to doing them, which it's quite unfortunate. But you kind of got to pick how much stuff you do, and sometimes, believe it or not, I do go outside. And so basically with the email stuff, I've just been like, I didn't do it in law enforcement. I never touched email. It was just not. The content was the most important stuff, and you can get some great things out of the email content. Once I moved into the civil, as well as the incident response realm, email became a lot more important, from two different topics. So the first one would have been obviously phishing links and incident response, because people get compromised that way. And so there's a method of, review the headers, review the content, get out the link, get out the malicious document, do the analysis, and you're done. And then there's the next side of things, which is the fraud investigations and the review every header, review all the content. Does it match up? What does it mean? Can this be manipulated? And that was really, really interesting. And I did a fun one at the end of last year, which was really an interesting experience. And then I think I was just chatting with Armin, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're doing this CTF." And I thought, well, that sounds fun, and it's a really niche area because we're kind of chatting, myself and Armin, as well as a couple of the others that are doing the CTF, and it's like, there's not a lot of information that is available for the forensic side of things. There's a lot of information when it comes to RFCs and getting email from A to B, and you can use that, obviously, especially the RFCs, which, I say Armin's really smart. He's read all of them. And so he's like, "Oh yeah, if you look at this part of the RFC, it says this, and that's what the answer is." And it's really having that solid understanding allows you to identify what should and shouldn't be there. And it's he's putting us through our paces with a lot of these different scenarios to try and identify when something has been manipulated. So a lot of the time it's not, can you tell me what this header says? It's what changed in this email, and obviously he's made those changes, and getting something to verify using free tools like the DKIM analyzers and DMARC analyzers. You literally can revert an email back to its original form and say, "Yep, that's what it was." Is really cool. And so I thought, this is fun. I'll spend some time doing this. I did not realize that some of these questions are going to be hours and hours and hours. especially when when I was chatting with him, and he's like, "This should only take you like 30 minutes." I'm like,
with his knowledge set, right? So his
"Yeah,
knowledge set, and I think that's something that everyone needs to realize that, but people can learn so much from reading your write-ups about how you did it, what your mental process was. I was, Devin Ackerman did a talk last week at the HTCIA New York Metro chapter, and he was going through the stats that Kroll pulled together for 2020. And he said that email compromise was 28% of incident type investigations. So it really is an area where if you're not getting that enriched understanding, I mean, some of the stuff I was reading about, like the differences between the HTML and the raw, and it was just really cool reading your posts and going to that workshop at DFRWS last week. So it just really cool information. Thank you for writing it up and sharing everything you were learning, because like you said, there's not as much deep content in that area. A lot of people who are doing email analysis, I think, are doing contextual analysis and are not necessarily noting outside of, usernames being faked against the actual address. They're not really deep looking at that the way that you may need to in a fraud type investigation. So really cool write-ups. Completely changed my mind on my understanding of email investigations. Also not my strongest suit because of my background. We all, like, people don't realize that about digital forensics, right? Like, there's so many niche areas and there's different experts in everything, and Armin's the expert in email, like, hands down. I love it.
And it's kind of interesting, especially when, like, and not necessarily email specific, but say mobile specific. I went from law enforcement into this civilian kind of world into to doing incident response and civil examinations, and we do mobile stuff, but not to the same degree, to the same, well, not even comparable the number of phones that we used to do, where a phone case would come in law enforcement that had 20 iPhones.
Yep.
It's like, well, that's my week, or even worse, here is a bag that used to contain a phone and now it's just a series of pieces. What can you get off this? And that is, I mean, not my realm, but that came through the door, and we don't get that. I don't have to deal with that anymore, thankfully.
And it's all changing, so you don't necessarily get to keep up with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can go, like, digital forensics can mean so many different things to so many different people just because of their backgrounds and the type of work that you do in a law enforcement setting is completely different to that you will do sitting as an incident responder in a SOC compared to performing email forensics, because you do, e-discovery and fraud investigations. And so, it's you can't be expected to know everything.
So you've done that transition. How did that transition work for you, going from law enforcement to working more IRs and breaches and email investigations?
It was good. So I was at the cops for 8 years, as I mentioned earlier, and I knew I wasn't going to be there forever. That's just, unfortunately, the nature of careers these days. Is not many people will pick a spot and stick there. And I could have, in terms of, the conditions were great, the work was fulfilling, but I wanted to go and work in a different area. I wanted to see different things, and I just, decided it was worth a change. And then Nick Klein, one of the who's my boss and fellow SANS instructor, he reached out and said, we're hiring, would you like to come over? And I thought, that sounds like a great opportunity. And I already had a few friends that worked there, and now obviously I've got a lot of friends that work there, and we do some really cool cases. We work on some really interesting things. It's definitely not the same, where we're not finding a body, we're not putting a homicide case to rest, we're not
right.
trying to fix what's wrong in the world, one person at a time. But we've worked on some really interesting casework from some of the fraud and other investigation types, and we've done some really interesting breach work and compromise assessments. And it's exposure to stuff I wasn't exposed to before, and
that's
putting
great
a
because
lot
you're
of
growing.
you put a lot of that deep forensic understanding into practice and quickly. So yeah, it was an interesting transition. One of the major transition parts was working with a lot of the guys that I worked with at the cops were really good on their feet, very smart people, and they could get data. You give them a microwave, they will get data off it. They were really good at getting access to information that someone was trying to make sure they didn't have access to. But the forensic analysis component, that kind of that major component for some areas of expertise, the cops really didn't have a lot in that area that I felt that I could really learn from.
Gotcha.
And so moving into to working with Nick, where that that expectation is quite high, that was really good because it really put me in a spot where I had to make sure that the way that I was presenting what I knew to be true was really accurate. Which I was doing that obviously from the police side, but it really leveled that up, which was really good. That's what I wanted. I really wanted that to be really banged on by someone that understands the forensic side of things and say, I don't think you can say that, or the way you phrase that is not clear to the person that it needs to be, which is great.
Absolutely. And that's such a critical part. It's not just about the analysis, it's also about the presentation. And when can you state with what certainty the assumptions that you're making based on the data, right? And how you're collaborating different pieces of data to make a certain assumption. So
yep.
I cannot sit down and have a conversation with Phill Moore without talking about This Week in Forensics, right? There's a reason that it's award winning. There's a reason it's been so nominated. There's a reason that I assign my students that they have to read every mobile article that's on This Week in Forensics each week, right? Like it's such a critical element of what we all do. I love the fact that you are on Aussie time in Sydney but when you finish This Week in Forensics by your Sunday night, it's my Sunday morning, and I have great reading for my entire Sunday. So how do you do it? What's the inspiration behind it? How do you organize it? I can cheat and say I've seen you organize it before because I've asked you that question in person. But if you could share a little bit about how you do that massive amount of work. And thank you for doing it. Like thank you on behalf of myself and everyone in the community. Thank you for continually making sure that every week for, I don't know how many years, 6 years?
Since 2016? Beginning of 2016.
6 years.
Yeah, it's been a while. Let's see. So how did it start? I think I've been working in the field for 5 years at the time. Yeah, about 5 years. And as I mentioned, like I knew that I wasn't going to be at the cops forever. And I'd already started, and this is kind of a tangent, but I'd already started thinking, well, how do I get out? What do I need to know? And in the years prior, we were an MK shop, and I said I don't really want to be stuck with that, so I started learning open source tools, trying to get closer to the data, rather than rely on some of the fantastic end scripts that one of our developers had put together. And that kind of that led to what became This Week in Forensics, because I was already reading a lot of things. Even before I got started at the cops, I had reached out to one of the managers there, and he said, "Here's a few RSS links that you can keep up with." And I thought, yeah, this is pretty easy. I was working, as you mentioned, I worked at Thomson Reuters, but I also worked a variety of other temp jobs because I was looking for work in the midst of the global financial crisis. As a person coming out of university with really very few appreciable skills and work experience, I didn't have a lot to offer, so I thought, I should read some things. And one of the other things I did was I found my trusty iPod and I downloaded the Cybercrime 101 podcast, the Forensic Forecast podcast, Cyberspeak, whatever else I could find, Security Now, Security Weekly, all that stuff. And I was listening to all of this stuff. I was reading as much as I could. I was reading books and trying to get my understanding, in the lead up to what was This Week in Forensics. And I found that I was missing articles because I wasn't keeping up with reading everything. And after 30 days in Feedly, stuff would drop off. And so I thought, I need to get serious about this and actually try and read things on a weekly basis, try to really know what's happening, what is everyone saying. Because for the most part, I don't want to do all this research if someone else has already done it.
Right.
I don't want to try and reinvent the wheel. And so then one of my colleagues started a blog and I thought, that's great, I'm going to do the same thing. And I thought, this will be easy. I'll just, write a quick summary of everything that I could find that week. And I think the first post was like 13 links.
I was going to say it was easier back then. I feel like people like you and I have done a disservice to you in adequately promoting that people share.
Yeah.
Well, 13 links. How many links were there last week?
Yeah, 200 and something. But I don't know if I was missing things. I mean, I was missing things.
Sure.
And that's one of those things where people are like, how do you find all this stuff? And it's like, I have Feedly subscription, and every time I find someone say, here is my blog, I wrote on it last year, even if I've missed it, I just add it to the list. And sometimes people pop up 2 years later having written something and then they start writing again. And I don't need to go and check everything because it's all in RSS, which is fantastic. So, the first year was an interesting experience. I spent a lot of time on the weekends throughout the week as well, reading things and digesting it and writing summaries. And then over the years, I've developed methods of speeding that up in terms of, pay for things that will allow you to make something really, really quick. It doesn't reduce the reading time, which there's no way to get around that. But a lot of that stuff, a lot of the stuff that was time consuming, I've been able to get rid of. And then now it's just, read a thing, see if it's relevant. If it's relevant, put it in the right category. And because I've been more busy. Now I just reference it and say, go here. If you're interested in this, go here. But yeah, for the first few years, I was doing my best to get all of the write-ups, which I miss doing. I guess I do like having my weekends, but having having the write-ups meant that I was able to really have to present what the thesis of that post was about, which meant that I knew it more, and that is better for my memory. But
right.
There's 200 odd posts, thanks COVID, 200 odd posts coming out a week. And right. So keeping up with it.
And pre-COVID, it was like 60, 80, right? Like, it's been a huge jump. Like, I feel like it was 60 to 80 a week looking at it. I don't know. You probably have the exact stats. But moving to where it is now, where it's over 200, I actually miss the summaries more. In no way am I asking you to do it. I'm saying I miss them more because now I have even more to look through. Chapin was mentioning that he also appreciates the time zone benefit, but that he's also one of those folks who does an occasional post. So the fact that you have that RSS feed, I know, and I'm sure others do, I always tell people when they start a blog to make sure they message you. And anytime I come across something, I try to cross-reference, see if I can find the post in your previous, like, just because you've got a search function. And if I don't, I just send you a message. So I encourage other people to send messages to Phill if you come across something as you're researching something, which is usually what it is for me. I'm researching something. I come across a blog post. I'm like, I don't remember seeing this on This Week in Forensics. Why? Because when I start my research, because it's now this compendium of 5 or 6 years, when I start my research, the first place I go is This Week in Forensics, and I run queries there. And the reason I do that is because I very, very quickly get blog posts. Phill can probably tell when I'm researching something and exactly what it is now that I think about it. But you're probably the only person who has the stats and can figure it out. But whatever I'm looking for, I search there first. And then I run my queries outside on Google Scholar and other sites to try to find additional data. And then I usually send you any blogs I find that are outside. But typically, that gets me where I need to go. So people aren't just using it weekly to know what's current. People are using it, or at least I am, as a historical reference to find articles related to some topic. And now that it's been around for half a decade, it's a good compendium of anything that's current. So really appreciate it. The reason I supplement with Google Scholar is you don't include paid sources. And so obviously I have to still search forensic journals for white papers. So just so people know.
And it's one of those hard things where, like, if I see, a new journal has been released, I'll try and mention it. But it's one of those, if I can't track it on RSS and I don't see it pop up on Twitter and I can't subscribe to it on email, it just gets to being in that too hard basket where I can already get all this other stuff. I can't, try and figure out what is new when it's not obvious.
Which might be a good note for listeners. If they publish something open access, and they know that it's not going to hit an RSS feed because it's like in AAFS or it's in a journal, but it does have an open access feed, maybe from their university or their organization, and that's the agreement. Share the open access link with Phill as soon as it's published, so it's new that week.
Absolutely. I like when people reach out and say, I've got this new thing, especially if I haven't seen it before. It is funny sometimes when people message me and I'm like, no, I've got your thing on RSS. Don't worry about it. Like, I won't miss it. I've seen it already. Or also great when it's like, hi, can you include this next week? And I'm like, I included it last week. And that kind of thing is always fun. But I do encourage people to I encourage people to write what they find. I encourage people to share what they find. I will get it to other people. And, you can do it for the same self-serving reasons as I did when I started the blog, which was it helps you when you're going to inevitably look for another job to be able to already have a group of people out there that know who you are. Or, and I've done this before, when you have a problem that you can't solve and you post it on Twitter and someone writes a blog post for you on how to solve that problem, which is great because you can get people that are interested or the subject matter experts or just have that right experience at the right time to say, oh, I actually know how to solve that problem, which gets you a better result, which is great.
There's such an incredible networking aspect there, and it's actually something I should have gone back to even when you were talking about the CTF. You talked about how you were communicating with the people you were playing with. I've done that too. I remember doing CTFs, and I've met people because, I used my same handle as my handle on Twitter, and they DM'd me, and they're like, hey, am I playing you on the CTF? Did you just beat me? And I'm like, yeah, let's meet for breakfast at real conferences in real life. After the CTF is over, it ends at midnight, and then we can go over the things that we missed and, and have that nerd out conversation. And I've made so many amazing relationships because of those coordinations, either on, hey, I'm having this problem, or somebody else posts a problem and I'm like, oh, I haven't looked into that, but you know what? I have a data set that contains it, or whatever it is. And then you share and you start collaborating. Like, that's the magic, and that's the networking, and that's the things that's going to make the difference in your next opportunity. And I think that's like so important for people to realize, and that even during COVID, when we're not at live events, that you can still build these relationships, that magic over Twitter is important, that magic during CTFs, the Discord channel, the Slacks, like, you can still collaborate with others. Don't let it, and even if you've never done anything, write that blog, share it, get people talking to you about that thing that you're now the expert in, because there's so freaking much. I love it, Phill. I love it.
And it's funny because when you write up stuff about CTFs, or you write stuff about something you're looking at or something you've done, and I'm pretty open about a lot of it, where you get to a stage where you say, this is what I've found, these are the things I don't know. Yeah. And I've had blog posts where I've thought, wow, this is really interesting, I should write this up. And I've said, I don't know how to do this. And someone else has taken that and written another blog post about, oh yeah, I figured it out. And this hex means this, and that means that, and here's a parser. And it was not stuff that I was going to do. I didn't have time to do it. And so it just allows you to, asynchronously collaborate in a way that's completely uncoordinated.
And the building on each other is amazing because people have complementary skill sets, right? So sometimes you might be able to get a portion of something and they might not have even thought to look at it. But once they see what you've done, they recognize something else based on their different experience, and they build on it in this unique way. And nobody can know it all. So us all being able to collaborate asynchronously through all of this information that we share, and you so generously collate and put into this digestible format where people can find, it is just so awesome, right? Like, I always tell people, if you don't write it, it didn't happen. Right? Like, if you don't document it, same thing when you're doing a case, right? You've got to do contemporaneous notes. It's writing a blog, I think, just also helps you with those skills of being able to write a report and being able to, as you were saying, speak to the work you're doing and present and support your findings. So it's all just skill building, and I just love it. And I'm so glad that you found the inspiration to do it and that you can continue to do it. It is such a important thing for the community. So thank you. So what about when you're not doing forensics? What makes Phill tick? Other than the Wiggles and Baby Shark.
So much Baby Shark. Actually, it's less Baby Shark. We're coming back to the Wiggles as my second daughter saying in the pre-show, for everyone that missed that, my second daughter has now just been exposed to the Wiggles, and they do some sort of hypnosis. It's got to be something involved, because she was whinging, the Wiggles went on, and transfixed. And it's horrible parenting. On my part, I get it. I'm taking the easy way out. But sometimes when the crying is gone for a little while, it just helps. And look, I spend a lot of time with my kids. I've got a 2-year-old and a 7-month-old, and we have a lot of fun. Do a lot of playing games and kicking a ball around and stuff like that, and obviously spending time with my wife. I do go outside sometimes. I do spend a lot of time in front of the computer, and there are lots of times where it's like 11 o'clock at night and I'm still doing that CTF that should have taken 30 minutes, and it's like, I'll be there soon, and it gets to midnight. It's like, oh, no, I need to turn this off now. Other than that, hanging out with my friends, which thankfully in Sydney we're not super locked down, so we can still see people, which I'm very grateful for. Playing soccer and going to the gym and previously going out and doing things which last year was a bit difficult, but all the fun stuff. That is standard normal people things.
I'm just laughing because I remember that you used to work on This Week in Forensics at the gym. Like you'd work out and then you'd use their Wi-Fi.
Yes, it's one of those things where it's like you can constrain yourself to a time period. You're like, I'm here. It's the same as going to the gym.
Right.
You're there, you may as well exercise. I'm like, well, I'll sit in the lobby. I've got my laptop. I'll work for 20 minutes, and then I'll go and exercise. And at least that way, I'll say I've gotten that out the way, and move on to something else. But yes, it's because I have a problem.
No, but you organize your time well to deal with it. So I think that's very, very admirable. So you do all these great things in forensics. We touched a little bit on how you got into the field. We touched a little bit on people writing their first blogs and a little bit about networking. But what's your advice to folks who are brand new, who are just learning about digital forensics and want to get into the field?
There's lots of advice, and I've written some of this on both This Week in Forensics and Think DFIR, and I'll tell anyone that wants to listen. A lot of it comes down to picking something, starting somewhere, and learning about it, writing it up, explaining what you know, explaining what you don't know. And I appreciate that does take time, and some people, time is a luxury they don't have. But there is, when it comes down to getting started in this field, especially if you've got no relevant experience and you're just interested, you have to showcase that interest. Or if you do have, if you have that interest and you want to showcase how you are exactly what your resume says you are, it gives someone that compendium of your research, your understanding, your explanations, and they get a feeling of how you are as an examiner by the way that you go around approaching that. And so I tend to tell everyone to do that. It makes more work for me, but I think it's great because you get to see people go about, as you said with CTFs, go about problems that you didn't know how to solve, or find something that you didn't even want to look at or think about looking at, and someone else has done the work for you. And people, especially if you're brand new and you don't know where to get started, I get it. It's where do you start there? Do you start in incident response? Do you go to network forensics? Do you start in mobile? You find something that is interesting to you, something that is interesting enough that you will spend an hour on the weekend doing, and that's where you start somewhere. You've got to find, you've had Richard on, for example. You look at the 13Q videos and you can learn a lot about a lot of things. YouTube and This Week in Forensics will get you somewhere with something relevant that you might be able to slowly build up your understanding of a thing. And then when you start testing it, when you start playing with it, that starts to solidify. With getting a job in the field, I don't have great advice when it comes to brand new people out of university, because your mileage may vary. If you're in Australia, you might have to go this route. If you're in the US, you might have to go another route. If you want to work in law enforcement in the US, you may have to be a police officer for a couple of years. Whereas, in Europe, in some places, you might not. And so that's where that kind of understanding and advice might be hard to give, especially when it comes to, getting a degree might open that door because you're rambling, sorry. The job that you're trying to get might actually require you to have a degree. So, all of these things all play into it when you're getting started. But when it comes down to it, you will have exams where you will have to learn something that is not documented.
Yeah.
You will have casework where you have to test things. And so those same skills that you could use when you get started in the field are applicable in the field as well. And so, looking at someone and saying they have that, I can hire them because I know that they have that, it lets you just stand out that little bit more.
I mean, I think you just brought up a good skill, and I know you and I were talking about this last week because we're both writing talks on testing right now. I'm giving one on the 17th. I think you're giving one coming up at a SANS thing, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's solid or not, but I know you were talking about it. And we were both talking about, how basically you can teach testing, but it's a unique skill knowing when to test, right? Because otherwise you can go down rabbit holes forever. Knowing how to test, what that methodology is, what that mental space is. There are defined steps you can take. So if that is something you're concerned about, or you're like, I don't even know where to start, it's a weird topic to write, right? Because it's weird to articulate something that you feel is kind of innate, but it's actually a good exercise to do. But I know you and I have been specifically talking about that recently, so I love that you bring that up. But it is such good advice to showcase your passion and your interest, because that is what people can judge you on if you don't already have experience. And you're so right, and your mileage may vary, and it really brings up a good point into looking at job posts in your region to understand what the requirements are. Because if you look at the postings, the requirements are listed there, right? So you can kind of get an idea of those regional differences if that's, the applicable concern. And, it's one of the things I thought was so interesting when you were saying it about the SEEB, about the State Evidence Electronics branch where you were, because that is just not something that I have seen, where it's like, oh, we're going to look at that aptitude and take people straight out of college because we have our training program that we're going to put people through. I think that's amazing. I feel like people in Australia who are coming out of school should really take advantage of that, if that program still exists, because what a great way to learn. And I really love that you said find that thing that interests you, because we talk about it a lot on the show, and we have so many guests who are in these different niche areas, but there's so many different areas. Something's got to interest you enough to research it, or you probably shouldn't be here. But I love that you bring that up.
And there's so much that you can learn, and if it's like, you might not. A lot of people, I think, might say, "Why should I write this? Who'll care?" It's not necessarily about that. You might write an article about user assist, and we might know everything about that, but now we know you know that too. And that's the thing where some people, you see that they've written an article and there's no new groundbreaking information. That's fine, because it's showing that you've taken the time to understand, to test something, and you might actually find something, as someone did just recently, that people didn't necessarily know about user assist, and that it might not mean that a program was executed in some instances. And so that's this kind of thing, which is like someone stumbled upon something new, which is great. And they
can we just say that every time somebody looks at a base Windows artifact, I feel like they discover something that makes it a little less certain. Like, it has happened so many times. Shell bags, user assist, like that kind of testing and being that thorough to see it, but also the changes in versions, right? Just because we know about something and we've been talking about it since Windows 7 doesn't mean it's the same in the newest release. So that's just, it's just as critical. And you can be validating. There's nothing wrong with also validating that something's the same. Stating that is of importance in itself.
Yeah. Something that we don't do great as an industry is make sure that everything that we understand is the same as it was and is the same that it will be. We do that, but I'll give a project idea out to someone. If someone can figure out a way to build that continuous validation pipeline that says, can I do this test and do this test across all versions of Windows? It's like, oh look, and some people figure this out straight away. That the format for this changed, or the way this responds to this stimulus changed. That is very valuable. And this is, you mentioned my talk, which it doesn't have a date yet, but I am working on it, which is, talking about different ways that people can test things, because you can download VMs from Microsoft with the latest version of Windows, actually old version of Windows as well. And you can grab a little SSD or a little hard drive, store all this data on there, and then now when you want to test a hypothesis, you can go, well, here's all the versions. And I did that last year, at the end of last year, because I wanted to know where the recent apps artifact disappeared to. And I was like, no, it was only there for 2 subversions of Windows 10, because I had all of those VMs built up and I tested them.
I had to look at something specifically in an old version of Internet Explorer the other week. Tara and I were working on something, and we had to find out that there were actually VMs for compatibility on old versions of IE, so you could check websites. And I pulled those VMs and was then testing the artifacts that were left to find exactly what I needed, specifically when a change happened between 2 VMs, like between a certain update, and figuring out how to update those VMs, even though they were designed not to update. But yes. There are so many different ways to test and get those environments, and going back and finding old VMs and old versions is so important sometimes, because evidence is not always on today's thing. So,
yeah, you've got all of these different issues with operating systems and file systems and versions of software and applications and actions, and how did this work? And it gets even worse when you've got cloud things like Google doing that Google research and finding that the version of Google that I use is not the same as the version of Google that you use.
And we had this conversation when you were testing it. Yes. Things are different.
I was like,
ethically, who would have thought that?
It happens. And so that's, just being aware of that, doing that research was able to highlight, hey, maybe that person doesn't see the exact same thing that you do.
One of the interesting ones was Brian Moran once reached out to me, and he was like, hey, your Skype support is broken. I was like, no, what version are you on? We had tested blah, 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 blah. And it turned out that because he was using an older phone, older phones force you to not be on the regular US version of Skype, but on the version of Skype available in the India market, which stored the data at a different database. And it had, the version number was the same, but it was actually a different application with a different APK, because the phone didn't support some of the newer features in the newer version of Skype. So they put you into this different market Skype. It was like bizarre, right? So you can think you understand something to the end. There's a really cool blog post on Brian Moran's blog about that, by the way, from like a year and a half, 2 years ago. But things like that are always so intriguing, and you learn them by testing. We are so over time. Phill, it has been such a pleasure having you. I could talk to you for hours about everything forensics, which we do. So just thank you so much for coming on and for being a guest and sharing all of your delightful insights.
Happy to do it. I'm definitely going to go back to bed. But of course, I was going to be able to, take this opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you so much. Coming up next week, we have Jay Sesportas, and then great lineup past then: Daryl Fife, Eric Katz, Chad Tilbury, Katie Nichols, Lexi Van Den Heuvel, Ali Hadi, Brian Hussey, Matt Mitchell, Steve Watson. Just an incredible schedule coming up all the way through April. You can check it out on magnetforensics.com/cache-up. Thanks, and we'll see you next week. Have a great day. Bye.